So I've had somebody in my chat for a very long period of time, or in my comments, leaving a video, hey, check out this person, Prim Reaper. They're a YouTuber. They're kind of like right-leaning. I want you to talk about them. So I looked up their channel. It's this channel right here, the Prim Reaper, and I looked at their most recent videos. It's like a part of series, the insidious aspects of social justice. Okay, so I'm gonna go over these videos. So I am not a social justice warrior. I am in fact a social justice healer. I think that there are too many people that chose the warrior class. We need to switch it up a bit. So I'm very much in the social justice camp, but I'm a social justice healer, okay? I aim to reform the bad parts of the social justice movement, okay? Not just be a warrior that just smacks everything, okay? I think we need more diversity in support roles in general. But yeah, with that being said, I'm ready to hear about the insidious aspects of social justice.
Hello once again from the Prim Reaper.
Hello.
This is a series that has been an incredibly long time coming. I actually got the idea for this about a year ago, but I've just had so many other things coming up that I've been putting it off. But now I think it's a good time to really dedicate some effort towards doing it justice. So what am I talking about? Well, many of us are already aware, at least tangentially, about the idea of social justice, right? Sure. And while many of the folks who watch my videos get this little instinctive red flag going up the moment they hear it, many other people who hear the term think of it a little bit more uncritically. After all, the concept of justice is an important cornerstone of our civilization, right?
This is true.
And with justice being a positive term, what could be so wrong with the idea of social justice? Well, unfortunately, it's
So, just to clarify, the reason why people have a problem with social justice is because conservatives won't shut the fuck up about it. Social justice and social justice warriors in general has been basically the buzzword attached to major progressive movements for the past few decades, basically. And because conservatives and just people on the right in general tend to, obviously fight their political opposition, fight left-wing, fight progressive bends, and, the term social justice has been sort of attached to the type of policy or the type of changes they're pushing for. That's why a lot of people may have, especially in her audience, may have an instinctive red flag reaction to it. And then there are the apolitical people that hear the word justice and are like, yeah, justice is cool.
Not always perfectly clear what could be wrong with it. I mean, I'm sure many of us who experience that uncomfortable sensation when we hear the word can't even clearly explain why we feel that way. That's
because there is no good reason. Let's keep.
That's what my aim with this video series is going to be, to point out all those little insidious aspects of social justice.
Insidious?
The ways in which it's not the wonderful path
Loaded
towards peace
vocabulary.
and harmony between all people that it makes itself out to be. In this introductory video, I wanted to go over some basic...
Another thing, social justice by itself doesn't solve every single issue ever within politics, okay? It is one part of a general intersectional movement that tends to look at the different structures of society as a whole, and the social aspect is one of the major parts, and seeing, analyzing the different moving parts in order to be able to draw good descriptive, statements about the state of the world as it exists right now, and then from there building on good solutions to be able to alleviate social issues that we're facing.
Before I start getting into the meat of things, let's start by defining the concept of social justice.
Good start.
I actually found an article that serves my purposes very well here, as it defines social justice from the lens that an activist, a supporter, or even just a casual individual who has heard the term once or twice might view it. I'll read a few snippets from this article just to paint a good general picture. I'll link the full article below if you want to read it in its entirety. Justice is the concept of fairness. Social justice is fairness as it manifests in society. That includes fairness in healthcare, employment, housing, and more. Discrimination and social justice are not compatible.
True.
Social justice depends on 4 essential goals: human rights, access, participation, and equity. When a society is just, it protects and respects everyone's human rights. This connection is essential since human rights are recognized globally. Being able to access essentials like shelter, food, and education is crucial for a just society. If access is restricted based on factors like gender, race, or class, it leads to suffering for individuals, communities, and society as a whole. Social justice isn't possible if only some voices are heard. Unfortunately, that's often what happens, and the voices of the marginalized and vulnerable are silenced.
This definition so far is it's pretty decent. Social justice is the concept of being able to analyze different facets of society and ensuring that everybody is given as equitable chance as possible to be able to, participate in a meaningful and in a just way within that society and interacting with those systems in a just way.
Many people believe that equality is one of the principles of social justice, but it's actually equity. What's the difference? Equity takes into account the effects of discrimination and aims for an equal outcome. There's a graphic that demonstrates this well. 3 people are trying to see over a fence. As an aside, I will return to this image later.
There's one thing I think that this definition falls a little bit short in, okay? Or is incorrect in. The statement that it seeks to aim for equality of outcome is not the case. What social justice and what general progressive movements seek to accomplish is they seek to accomplish equality of opportunity on a vast aggregate scale. And that's what they seek to accomplish principally. The difference is that through equality of opportunity, we give every person an equal starting ground when it comes to being able to form their life in the way that they wish to form it and have the success that they wish to accomplish, interact with the people they wish to interact with, and work the type of jobs that they wish to work with. For example, equality of outcome means that everybody ends up at the best space possible at the very end of things, which is not really the same thing. It means everybody has to end up at the same spot, which is obviously not something that is entirely possible at all. Because there are individual differences in like upbringing or just any really like variety of things. That means that people who had even the exact same sort of just generalized starting grounds from a societal perspective will still end up with on like from different, you know, like endpoints or whatever. So there's a bit of like a conflation here, a mischaracterization about the goals of social justice. Social justice, at least, you know, in my opinion, per my understanding, seeks to accomplish equality of opportunity, not necessarily equality of outcome.
Are trying to see over a fence. As an aside, I will return to this image later. Social justice means that everyone's human rights are respected and protected. Everyone has equal opportunities. This doesn't guarantee that society will be perfect and everyone will always be happy. However, everyone will have a fighting chance at the life they want.
So you see there on the end, this vocabulary, this paragraph tends to hint more towards like equality of opportunity than it does equality of outcome. I'm not sure why they said equal outcome here. That's probably what they're going to hinge on now.
Everyone will have a fighting chance at the life they want. You can see all the positive words that are shared in this article. Fairness, human rights, a just society, equality. Any rational and unselfish kind of person would agree that these are good things, right?
True.
After all, the converse, imbalance, injustice, inequality, human rights violations, all of these words immediately stir up images of unpleasant, even barbaric societies in which we surely would not want to belong. So where does the disconnect start to come in? Well, let's return back to the example image they mentioned in the article. It's a famous image, and I would be very surprised if you all weren't familiar with it, but let's briefly explore it. Now, the original image simply demonstrated the supposed difference between equality and equity by showcasing 3 people trying to watch a baseball game without paying for any tickets and instead trying to peep over a fence. Lately, they've been adding a third image called Liberation, in which the fence has been removed and we now just hilariously have these 3 insane people standing in the outfield cheering, who are inevitably about to be escorted away by security. Let's just start with the first 2 images for argument's sake. And because, frankly, attempting to illustrate the idea of liberation from human rights inequalities with removing a fence around an arena housing a recreational sport is just a totally garbage analogy to begin with. Looking at these 2 images, it's nice and simple and obvious.
It's not the same, obviously, as like broader societal liberation efforts. I mean, it's a soccer game, but these analogies and allegories can serve to, you know, prove like abstract points and conceptual points when it comes to the way we view issues in society.
To solve the problem. Nobody would argue that the equality square is the better scenario just from these photos alone. After all, it's not like the tall guy is giving up anything other than a mangy old box that doesn't meaningfully improve his situation. Not only is it a no-brainer, but people who don't think on it any more than just a glance at the photos will be left with this lasting residual idea that, oh yeah, I guess equity is better than equality. However, let's try.
So we're 5 minutes and we're halfway through and we still haven't gotten to the point where she's going to make, where she has made any argument or they've made any arguments against social justice as a phenomena.
And see if the same logic still holds true. What if the tall fellow put a lot of time and effort into building a proper stool for himself so that he could more comfortably see over the fence? Is he obligated to give up his stool just to help a stranger better be able to see? I mean, it would sure be nice of him if he gave it up willingly, but should he be required to? What if the littlest guy not only didn't build his own stool, but in fact had carelessly smashed 2 boxes prior to the other 2 guys showing up? Does he still deserve more despite his previous reckless actions? Unfortunately, equity...
So, let me answer these questions. When it comes to like making societal attitudes and especially governmental policies or like organized around social justice and stuff like that, it's not, you don't look at individual instances of, oh, this one person did this thing and therefore the government can treat people differently. It would be cool if we lived in a world in which naturally it wouldn't be cool if we lived in a world in which the government had enough information to perfectly adjust for the given individual. But let's say we had like a society in which like every person's individual like specific needs and like different like difficulties that they were facing specifically were adjusted for by government policy. So there was no like welfare laws, there were no over adjusting, there was no under adjusting. It's just like perfectly adjusted for the individual person. However, we don't live on that type of like world. That's not how we're able to draft policy and enact just general like social agendas, I suppose, with society as a whole. When it comes to equality of opportunity, when it comes to social justice, when it comes to equity, what seeks to be accomplished is that you look at different social groups through an intersectional lens on an aggregate. So you see that, okay, on the aggregate, on the average, we see that certain different groups within society, certain racial groups, maybe certain ethnic groups, certain, you know, like religious groups, certain like gender and sexual minority groups or whatever, face specific difficulties or certain pressures on them that other groups on average do not face to the same extent. Therefore, in order to reach the goal of being able to balance out the opportunity of the equality of opportunity within society, we want to seek to promote sort of social attitudes and promote policy that adjusts for existing inequities within society based on these social identification measures. And when it comes to like stuff like this, making the argument that, oh, well, what if somebody within the marginalized community didn't make good choices, so therefore they're like, they don't deserve, you know, the type of like the compensation for the government. That just it falls very short, because that's not really how like policy in general is drafted or such. And on top of that, having like a bad, like as they would put, making bad choices or having a bad attitude, stuff like that would be more oriented around an argument for equality of outcome rather than equality of opportunity, given that you live in a world in which equality of opportunity is already established. So the argument she's making here is that, okay, so this is the implicit message, given that we already have equality of opportunity, which is sort of what's being suggested here, why should a person who makes bad choices be compensated as much for someone who makes good choices? That's, you know, that's where it falls short, because you need to look at the equality of opportunity part of it as well, and you need to look at the aggregate part of it.
It rarely looks so simple in real life. This is almost the easiest sort of straw man you could come up with to try to promote the idea of equity. Kind of like comparing a mustache-twirling multi-billionaire to his poor workers working for minimum wage or less. It's easy to present examples like these and say, see, nobody deserves to have so much while others have so little. Equity is therefore 100% a good thing. But the buck doesn't usually stop there, does it? I'm not even talking about the people who see injustice in progressively smaller earnings gaps between two individuals.
Progressively smaller earnings gap? Okay, if you look at the changes of inequality over any period of time within the last century, you will see that the differences in inequity and inequality between different groups of people within society is exacerbating in a lot of different ways when it comes to, especially when what she's talking about, which is talking about like wealth. Social inequality when it comes to like economics is something that is being exacerbated, not something that is shrinking. I don't know why she said that.
For example, not just multi-billionaires, but also millionaires, or even just people who are able to afford their own housing, say, versus a homeless individual living on the street. But what about examples where individuals make broad, sweeping claims about entire racial or sexual groups being marginalized, and therefore needing to be propped up at the expense of the groups that are perceived to not be marginalized? What about the people who look
Okay. At the expense of other groups? Okay, so number one, this is a very sort of like oversimplification of what intersectionality is. Saying that intersectionality is just like the dubbing of this entire group is just, you face difficulties, you face advantages, you face difficulties, you face advantages. What that is, practically, is just like a dramatic oversimplification over true intersectional analysis. True intersectional analysis posits that, okay, different social groups interact with each other in very, very, very complicated ways with, you know, benefits and hardships faced by different groups to different extents. So if you look at, for example, the issue of like sexism, we can see that in a whole bunch of ways, women have it harder in society in X, Y, and Z ways. And men have it better in those departments. You know, like, for example, if you talk about maybe like employment and, you know, like pink tax and the wealth gap, earnings gaps and stuff like that. But then if you look at it from the other perspective, if you look at men, it's like, okay, well, it's not all, you know, men aren't just, you know, default advantage compared to women. You have different things like, for example, issues related to mental health, issues related to, you know, like criminality, issues related to substance abuse, and those type of things. So what you're critiquing is like an oversimplification of what intersectional analysis seeks to accomplish. So there is the initial misunderstanding between the aggregate versus on the individual level when it comes to policy. There is a second sort of like confusion between the difference between equality of outcome and equality of opportunity. And then there's a third thing, which is that this is a critique against an oversimplified version of intersectionality, which is just like an oversimplified version of the theory, basically.
Not at the full context of an individual's situation, but rather focus on the traits of said individuals and then proceeding to make inferences about their situation based on those traits. When we look at equity as a simple binary of this group has more, this group has less, therefore this group needs to give up more to support this group, we begin to lose a lot of nuance and context that allow us to take measured steps to improve the lives of others.
Her critiquing social justice warriors for lack of nuance is pretty funny.
Instead, we begin to focus on surface issues that not only often do not make the problem better, but often cause different kinds of problems otherwise. Some examples. When we assume blindly that one group of people has all the privilege in society, we become blinded to areas in which they might be struggling. Worse, we may even become less empathetic even if we acknowledge they're struggling. Individuals belonging to the supposed privileged group may find it very difficult to reach out for help when they are struggling, owing to a lack of services available for them or government funding to support their concerns.
So perfect. She recognizes herself that there is a difference between a good, the complex, the accurate version of intersectionality and the oversimplified version of intersectionality. And there are certain people who are just dumb and aren't doing proper intersectionality, who just say, oh, all white people have it better, all men have it better, all cis people have it better, all heterosexual people have it better. Like blanket as an aggregate, always, that's it, end of discussion, no nuance. Yeah, sure, it's possible, but if you're gonna like address or make critiques towards social justice as an idea or intersectionality as an idea, you should grapple with the steel man or the best possible like representation and dissemination of the idea rather than its worst representatives.
After all, they don't need support. They're the privileged group. Another example, when we assume blindly that one group of people is oppressed or at all times disprivileged, this also impacts the way we view and treat individuals from this group. We may,
even though, you know, this video shit, I think the drawings are pretty cute, okay?
We make assumptions that a person is worse off than they really are. We may make concessions about them that we would not make for other individuals, leading many of them to question if they have really gotten to where they are based on merit or based on diversity points. We may downplay their failures, or even blame them on external factors. In time, these individuals may even come to see themselves as worse off than they really are. They may feel discouraged, like they're going to be discriminated against far more than they otherwise might be. They may become suspicious or distrustful of others. Now, this video is just intended to be a brief introduction to the series, so I'm not going into as full of detail as I will be in each of the segments. But one thing I am looking to do in each of these videos.
Basically no stronger argument made here in the first video, no like major argument. There was just a bunch here, just a bunch of concern trolling. Oh wait, what if they feel like, oh, you know, bigotry of low expectations, oh, what if like this X, Y, and Z, which don't really like belong in a broader discussion about an intellectual or like an academic idea or conceptualization or framework, and instead are just more of just like individual critiques towards like certain representatives of a given ideology or whatever. First video, pretty weak, okay? Pretty weak, I'm not gonna lie. Let's see second video. Do we get more arguments?
This is the first official video in my Insidious Aspects of Social Justice series, and I wanted to do this first one on divisiveness because I think that several elements of this topic build particularly well off the introduction video. I originally wanted to include control and divisiveness together in one video because I believe that the two ideas are very closely linked. However, I think that if I tried to do that, we'd be looking at a 30+ minute video, and people complained the last time I did that. Instead, I think I'll try and save control for last because I actually think it will tie the whole series together quite nicely. For now, I have noticed a pattern that I want to walk through in this video. A lot of social justice touts itself on wanting everyone to be equal and have the same opportunities and to be able to live their best lives. Now, not to go all hippie on everyone, but when I envision a world of equality, I imagine a world not necessarily where everyone has the exact same material things as each other. It's just not realistic. You can't possibly expect a
So once again, just the conflation between equality of opportunity and equality of outcome.
Heart surgeon to work as much as he does and earn the same as someone working at McDonald's.
Okay, and then we got the straw man of communism. Nice move. I was saying the password. Okay, cool.
But without going too far down that rabbit hole, I envision a world where we all regard each other with the same human kindness.
There is no rabbit hole. It's a ditch that's 3 centimeters deep, okay?
That we don't treat each other differently because of superficial differences like our skin color or sexual preferences. Instead, we focus on what we give back to the world around us, the kinds of people we are. This may not look like the same thing from each person. Again, different people will be able to accomplish different kinds or different amounts of things. But the important thing is the way we treat each other. I know, not exactly the most realistic thing. I'm a bit of an idealist, but this is the kind of thing I envision when I think about equality. In social justice, however, their calculus around trying to make everyone equal often fixates on the differences between people. Not only that, it tends to highlight and magnify these differences. And then it takes those differences, and it does its very best to tell people how those differences either contribute to or subtract from their ability to lead an equal life as compared with everyone else. In order to explain this...
So, if you look like empirically, we can see that once again, certain different groups within society face difficulties and advantages that other groups do not. Intersectional analysis is looking at how the different identities in a person's, part of that the different aspects of a person's identity, how they interact and the ways they push or pull people towards certain outcomes in life. And generally, we want to draft policy that, on an aggregate, tries to balance this out as much as possible so that intrinsic identity traits about you don't play a strong part in your likelihood to be able to succeed in life. The Venn diagrams are not even...
This more thoroughly, let's begin with a little idea called intersectionality. Now, for those who may not know, the concept of intersectionality was originally a legal concept coined in 1989 by Kimberly Crenshaw, challenging single-issue analyses in issues of discrimination. That is to say, a court focusing solely on the fact that a plaintiff is either black or a woman misses the fact that, as a woman who is also black, they have the potential to experience multiple kinds of discriminatory behaviors simultaneously.
Nice. Let's see how she works with this.
The original message was really just intended to get people to try to see the multiple layers in which a person may be impacted by the factors of their identity. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that, hey, that's not really an offensive message. In fact, I would almost go as far as to say it's a pretty banal message. I may experience something that I wouldn't otherwise experience because I'm a woman. I may experience something that I wouldn't experience because I'm white. That guy may experience something because he's Japanese that he wouldn't experience if he was black. That guy living in Japan may experience life very differently than that guy living in Europe or the USA. It should be a no-brainer. Different aspects of our life all come together.
Well, it should be a no-brainer. For a lot of people, it really isn't. A lot of people that hold key and hold very intrinsic to their worldview, and more of the individualistic analysis you're presenting here, being that, at the end of the day, it's only your individual effort that make up your success in life, and that's the only thing we should look at and the only thing we should analyze. They would hold the belief that, okay, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what identity groups you're part of, it's going to be your effort that decides your advantages or whatever, so we shouldn't really do policy based on intersectionality. We should just tell people to work harder.
To impact the way we experience our life. In other news, water is wet, the sky is blue, and salt and vinegar is objectively the best flavor of potato chip, and fight me IRL if you disagree. However, this message has become, well, distorted, especially in the past decade. To give you an example, let's navigate to a lovely little website called Intersectionality Score. Now, I'll be perfectly honest, I'm about 99% certain this is a satire site, but satire or not, it provides a great visual example of the way intersectionality is often used these days. It's summarized in the first quote you see on the page. The theory that the overlap of various social identities, such as race, gender, and sexuality, define your level of systemic oppression. You know, as if you can run down a checklist of boxes and have a little calculator spit out a number that tells you exactly how oppressed you are. Well, if you'll excuse my very subtle foreshadowing, I'm going to go ahead and run down this checklist of boxes, slider scales, and see how I stack up. Okay, so just running through this really, really quickly. Let's see, I am white.
Oh, she brings up this academic concept and then levies a critique towards this highly complex and well thought out academic concept based on one website and a poor implementation of it, in which somebody appears to make or attempts to make a numerical designation of a person's intersectional score or whatever.
More straight than I am gay. That's definitely not fully straight.
Okay, how long does she do this?
Average and not really. Okay, I can see this being satire. But yeah. So yeah, seeing the add your own slider.
Add your own slider, okay.
There is kind of yeah, okay, I can see this being satire.
It's literally, she says it's a satire website, and she still includes this as a critique. This is their first critique. We're 6 minutes into the video. And the first critique she's levied against the system is this: there's a website that does the thing bad.
But yeah, apparently I am more privileged than 44% of others based on these categories.
No.
So there you have it. Now, again, even if this site in specific is satire, there are other measures like this that are being used seriously. Even my own place of employment did that rather well-known take one step forward, one step backward privilege test that essentially covers the same points.
And now she's talking about some cringe corporate policy, team building, HR exercises. Please.
If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll include a link to one in the low bar so you can test it for yourself. On that note, let me go ahead and provide my first example of what a scenario might look like if someone was using social justice style thinking, and if they were not. Now, add 1 point to your score if you identify as male. Subtract 1 point if you identify as female.
What?
I never really thought about it before, but I guess I really am in the less privileged category as a woman. They have always had more access to different careers, have always been treated with respect. They aren't expected to do anything around the house. We have to have all the babies and sacrifice our careers to raise them. And on top of that, we have to deal with things like catcalling and being afraid of being attacked at night on the streets.
So she has analyzed or recognized a few of the disadvantages that comes with being a woman in the current patriarchal society, okay?
Subtracting a point for being a woman makes sense.
Okay.
Excuse me, but I reject the notion that a simple binary like this accurately represents the situation here at all. Sure, women may have some unique concerns they have to deal with, but so do men. For every way you can look at a woman's experience as a negative, like maybe women more often having to stay home and raise the children, you can look at it as a positive. Like women are supported more often to stay at home and raise the children, which is often a very fulfilling role, with extended leave and financial supports relative to men. The same is true of men's experiences. Reducing it down to one sex has it better and the other has it harder oversimplifies the situation and minimizes the many positive elements that come with being a woman.
Congratulations, you have understood intersectionality. Gee, I swear to God, this video. Whoever told me to watch this, I am very annoyed at you right now. Oh wait, what was that? What was it? Was it the social justice lens? What did they say? What was the frame? Or did they say intersectional? The social justice lens. Okay, both. This is literally intersectionality. She has, through this skit, she has done an intersectionality. Okay, she has done an intersectionality. She has demonstrated that. Okay, these are the disadvantages that one faces by being a woman. These are the advantages. Now, let's look at them and look at the way they interact with people in society. Like, I swear to God, we're 8 minutes into the video.
This second example was my actual experience, paraphrased of course, when my work put on the presentation that had that +1, -1 privilege test.
And then
these styles of tests, where we act like we can just plot people on a chart and say, this is your oppression score, vastly oversimplify the human experience and degrade our ability to examine the complexities of life. I mean, if you imagine that such a test asks only one question about wealth and 7 questions about race, sex, sexual orientation, and so forth, you could conceivably have a rich black woman that scores higher on the oppression scale than a poor white male. Like, I'm sure if you ask any white homeless man on the street if he would like to trade places with poor underprivileged Oprah, I'm sure they would be happy to give up a few of their privilege points to take her up on the offer.
It's so dumb. It's so stupid. It's like imagine this. Imagine this. Okay, this is the mind space that we're in right now, okay? We're in the mind space of you have an intrinsic or just like an instinctual negative reaction against social justice based on a bunch of conservative talking points that you've heard over the past decade, okay? You have that instinctual reaction, okay? What you then decide to do is you decide to attack a straw man, like an oversimplification of the given, academic framework that social justice is based on, intersectionality, and you then decide to rebuke that oversimplified version of intersectionality with complete intersectionality. And then you're framing this as if you have disproved or you have pointed out the issues in intersectionality, in social justice. It's like you're creating your own just pointless debate in your head where you're using the arguments for the thing you're critiquing to make your critique against the thing. It's ridiculous.
I know not all discussions on intersectionality are quite as obtuse as assigning an oppression score to people, but almost all discussions on this topic have at least a grounding in the idea that there are some people who necessarily have more power than others, and those who are necessarily more marginalized by virtue of several different factors, many of which are often out of one's control. There are a few problems with that strategy. First, highlighting differences between people in this manner actually reduces the chances that they will behave in a cooperative manner.
Okay, and to the Oprah example, this is the classic example. Oh, what about a homeless white guy and Oprah Winfrey? Okay, true. However, what's to say that Oprah Winfrey wouldn't be in a better spot if she wasn't black, if she was white? And who's to say that the homeless white guy wouldn't be in a worse spot if he was black? And if you look at the likelihoods of that in regards to the way society treats these different identity groups, it's not that, hard of not that far of an assumption to make, really. It's just, also, wealth is literally part of an intersectional analysis standpoint. Yeah, I don't know what to say.
You can see this in many examples, but a good basic example is the collective action problem. That is, a situation in which individuals would be better cooperating, but competing interests prevent them from doing so.
Okay, I want to see how this cooperation problem is proves that intersectionality doesn't work. I'm super excited for this. I'm going to go into this, and I'm going to be expecting a strong, well-rooted argument. Let's see.
Like the prisoner's dilemma. Okay. Individuals primed to look for the differences in others may be more likely to turn inward and begin focusing on their own self-interest. This is especially so if the person is made to feel shunned or alienated for their differences. It is triply true if the person is treated as though their differences are a problem that no amount of work on their part will properly overcome. Next, I really think
okay, literally nobody's making the argument that if you're black, you're just fucked. It's it's over. It's done for you. If you're a woman, it's fine. Literally nobody's saying that. These are extremely complicated and nuanced different pressures on a given individual's life based on these identity groups. On top of that, I completely fail to see how her system of sort of individualistic analysis on the world as a whole will make people look out and want to work as a collective more than a more intersectional approach where we recognize the different societal pressures that society is putting on us as a whole, as people, and working together to overcome those. It's ridiculous.
Categorizing people in this hierarchical way can result in some dysfunctional and oversimplifying thinking patterns. You'll note that this circle doesn't differentiate between someone who, say, hoards billions of dollars while their workers starve, and someone who donates much of their wealth to charity, or someone who...
Oh, her rebuttal of intersectionality is that some rich people donate to charity.
Who uses their scientific education to create medicines to save the world, versus those who use that education to commit war crimes. It takes a very broad range of human experiences and puts them into easily digestible chunks. Furthermore...
So what she's done here, she's misunderstood. She believes... Now she's feeding into another like straw man or misconception that the right has about like social justice. She believes that this like intersectionality is like a judgment, is like a moral calculus, like judges a person's moral worth. That's why she uses these examples here, because these examples, like giving to charity, researching for science, don't really have like, they aren't related to the core concept of certain identities giving advantages or disadvantages when placed in a given society. It has nothing to do with that. But she's conflating it here because she's trying to make it seem as if intersectionality seeks to like morally rank people based on these identities. And you're a bad person if you have an advantage identity. You're a good person if you have a disadvantage identity or whatever, which is literally not the case. It's not a moral calculus. It's a success calculus. So there's been just another like there's been a miss. Okay. She took a shot and she just missed. Okay. I don't even know what to say at this point.
And I'm going to go over this topic a bit more in detail in my Guilt as a Weapon video in this series. But by casting some people in the powerful circle and others in the marginalized circle, you train people to look at these differences between others in an adversarial manner. It's no longer men, women, and gender minorities all have different experiences from each other that result in different life circumstances. Now it's a hierarchy between the three, with men supposedly on top.
No, that's the straw man. That's the oversimplification. That's the incorrect understanding of social justice. That is the incorrect interpretation of intersectionality. And if you want to go there, if you want to pull up and you want to say, hey, there are a bunch of dumb fucks on Twitter who misunderstand intersectionality and who misunderstand social justice and think it's about ranking people through like oppression Olympics. If you want to shit on those people, hey, I'm all here for it, okay? But then your video shouldn't be titled Divided by Equal Insidious Aspects of Social Justice 2. It should be titled Divided by Equal Insidious Aspects of Twitter Lefties Part 2, okay? That's what it should be titled, I swear to God. Oof.
You don't see how this might make the women and gender minorities trained in this style of thinking feel a little bit of negativity or enviousness towards the people supposedly on top? Or make the poor men feel confused, misunderstood, or feeling uncertain about what to do to make other people feel better. Further to this point, people in the so-called marginalized groups may begin seeing what might be otherwise benign or at least neutral behaviors in the privileged groups as negative or flaunting their power. Take the concept of mansplaining, for example. Let me provide another illustration scenario, and note this is just an example and is not reflective of my actual views. I have a very strong opinion on the topic of euthanasia. I think it should be banned entirely.
Okay, she said, I have a really strong opinion on the topic of euthanasia. I think it should be banned entirely.
But there's a lot of cases where it can be a useful thing to consider, like in terminal cancer patients, like my grandmother, or people who've been suffering for many years. It's a little excessive to state that there's never a good use for it.
Oh no.
Wow, okay. I have actually taken a lot of time to read on this subject, so I think I know what I'm talking about, and I really don't need you mansplaining to me about your opinion, thanks. Well, I've read a lot of stories about where it's abused, and I think that it can be too much of a slippery slope to freely allow it, but thank you for taking the time to share your opinion with me. I really appreciate that. This is a situation...
I want to die, dude. Oh no, she's gonna defeat social justice warriors one, like, fucked up skid at a time. I swear to God. Okay. Okay, nevertheless, I'm gonna try my best to make a counter-argument against this, okay? So what she's critiqued here, the example she has laid forth is a misuse of the idea or the concepts or the phenomena of mansplaining, okay? So what mansplaining is, it's a situation in which a man sort of, you know, based on the gendered expectations and the gendered, you know, suggestions we have for different gender groups in society, assumes that a woman knows less about a given topic than them, and therefore might explain something that the woman is already perfectly aware of in a condescending way. So, for example, you know, a great, you know, case of this is, for example, I can remember like plenty of times in school where like guys will argue about like psychology, with girls who like literally take psychology as like their higher level class within the International Baccalaureate program, and they will like talk about like things like biases, and they will be like, so you know, I understand what you're saying, but there is like a thing called like a bias. It's like basically when you have like this idea in your head and you have like this presupposition, I suppose, and whatever arguments you're making, you're kind of trying to appeal to that presupposition. It's pretty complex. I don't know if you understand this, you know, I don't know if they teach this in like higher level psychology, but you know, it's something that might influence your decision-making process or whatever. It's something like that, right? It's like a guy just maybe by basis of their gender roles, assuming that this like a woman just doesn't know as much about the given issue as the man does, despite the fact that the woman in this situation knows far more about it. Now, it is very difficult to say conclusively that this is because of mansplaining or whatever. However, there's still utility in having that as a term. Her illustrating a misuse of mansplaining and saying that therefore the concept of mansplaining is a shit concept or something we shouldn't consider would be the same as if we discredited the identification of malice on a person's behalf because it's misused in one situation. So what this might look like is, for example, let's say that there's two people and they're going to the party. Okay, let's do some high school example. All right, let's say that there's two guys. They're going to this party. Okay, and they both have a crush on the same girl. Okay, they both want the same. They're both interested in the same person. They're both interested in the same girl. Okay, now let's say that they have a conversation just like the day before the party, and one of the guys says to, you know, the other guy, like, hey, yeah, the party is at address X, you know, you should go there and check it out. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Next day they go to address X, it's the wrong address. They aren't there, they miss out on the party or whatever. Now, it can very much be the case that that guy friend genuinely thought the party was at address X and just got it confused, and then was informed sometime the next day and like forgot to tell the other person or wasn't able to for whatever reason. That's a possibility, but it could also have been the case that they didn't want this person at the party, okay? They wanted them to go to location X so that they wouldn't be at location Y, so they wouldn't be able to go to the party. So they could have their opportunity competing for this girl or whatever the fuck, okay? That's also a possibility. So this would be like saying that we should never understand the concept of malicious intent. We should never conceptualize it. We should never think it's a thing, because I'm going to give you this hypothetical example in which somebody does something which may appear malicious, but it wasn't actually malicious. It was just like a fine example of like somebody just having an accident or just like doing something for another reason or whatever. So therefore, we should never assume maliciousness. That's sort of like the same argument she's making here. Just because there's like a misapplication of the label of mansplaining or the concept of mansplaining, she's trying to make it seem as in, oh, okay, there's nothing of value to this concept or whatever, which is it's not an argument. It's not a good argument, okay?
Where we unnecessarily run the risk of injecting malicious intent where there likely never was any. A man in any such situation could be trying to explain something as a means of dismissing the woman's beliefs, but they could also be explaining because they are passionate about it, or because they have also studied the subject and want to present an alternate viewpoint, or even just because they enjoy engaging people in discussion. By framing it as a male having a power-over relationship with the woman, it turns what could be a normal conversation into a territorial pissing match. Similarly, on the race side of things, many people will lay a lot of social problems at the foot of white supremacy, whether or not the situation is actually related to that problem at all. It has become a very easy scapegoat for a lot of issues where other explanations could reasonably be inserted.
Can we have an example?
It's not that many police officers have little more than a high school degree and a 6-month physical fitness regimen, and that they are not expected to attend university or complete any ethics courses that causes problems. It's all about white supremacy.
Okay. All right. Time to be charitable here. Okay. Okay, it is what you said is true. Those things 100% most certainly have a part to play in things like, for example, police brutality and police mistreatment of certain racial minorities. Sure, 100%. However, there is a strong empirically backed basis to a lens of analysis coming from white supremacy as well. So if you look at, for example, over-policing historically, when you look at, for example, racial profiling based on, rates of criminality, when you look like, for example, the mistreatment of certain, individuals on a race when it comes to like the arrest and the use of violence or some stuff like that on the basis of their race, when you look at discrepancies in sentencing, when you look at the likelihood of being pulled over for like stop and frisk or, while in a car, and the way that changes depending on whether or not the police officer is able to see the race of the person driving. You can also make a fairly strong argument that, hey, maybe race has something to do with it. So this is once again just like an oversimplification. Just because you can find certain other explanations for a certain phenomenon or something occurring doesn't mean that there aren't other explanations as well that certainly play a part in it. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't talk about all the different, possible reasons for this. And a lot of the good people, a lot of the effective, the pragmatic people who talk about, like police brutality and stuff like that, will mention the role race plays in it, but also mention the way that the police is structured as an institution and the way it's fucked. It's like there's too many responsibilities to it compared to like the training that they're given. They're given too many resources. They aren't, like stuff like that. So it's a really bad argument, but I mean, I'm taking it step by step just in case.
It's not that X ethnic group makes up less of the North American population than Caucasian people that accounts for their lower representation in many career fields. It's all about white supremacy.
You see, Prim Reaper, there is a thing called underrepresentation, okay? Where even though it is the case that, for example, certain racial minorities, like Black people in the United States of America, are a smaller portion of the population, it can still mean that they are underrepresented in regards to their portion of the population, even though they are the minority. So, for example, if you look at the people in positions of power within the government, okay, and Blacks make up, 13% of the population, I believe. If you look at that and you see, hey, 13% of the government positions is made up by Black Americans, nobody's going to complain that that's an underrepresentation or that that's unjust, because that is a proportional relationship to the amount of Black people that exist within the population as a whole. Now, if there are 5% of Black people within positions of government and they make up 13% of the population, that is an underrepresentation because it is less than their share of the total population. So saying that, there's less of them just because there's less of people in the population as a whole. Yeah, sure. That's a good argument in case somebody expects Black people to make up like 50% or 40% of people within government, 100%. But typically people don't complain about that. People complain about them making up less of a portion of a given power base than exists within the entire population group as an aggregate.
And framing things in this way stokes the fires of negativity and distrust and helps to fuel demands that those in power must do this or that or pay various amounts of money to make up for their transgressions that many of them have never had any individual hand in. This quite naturally causes these groups to feel alienated, which may result in any number of negative outcomes, ranging from unearned guilt and shame on one end, to discomfort and avoidance of the groups they are claimed to have transgressed against, to outright reactionary hatred on the other end. On the other hand, you will of course have some people who accept this narrative and work to challenge their unearned privilege, but many of these will be token efforts that will likely appease very few people. They will certainly not give up their jobs or their homes for people they feel are less privileged than them, and the few that do will either be called out for not doing enough, or will be called out for pandering. Either way, it's almost never enough, and unfortunately, the divide that is caused by all of this only seems to be getting stronger.
So the argument she's making now, right, basically, what she made there, in case you guys didn't catch it, okay, is that she said basically that, oh, this intersectionality, it's too radical. It's creating people that are extremely reactionary and that are extremely far right-wing and who want to discriminate against people. Oh, we need to stop this intersectionality because these people are bad. That's the case she was making here initially. People that feel like disenfranchised or whatever, disillusioned with the sense of like intersectional analysis. And this is just like concern trolling to the fullest, 100%. And these people aren't going to stop being bigoted if we don't do intersectional analysis at all. And this type of like idea promising, hey, I'm sure these people will become less bigoted if we do less progressive analysis on society as a whole it's a ridiculous argument.
I will end this video here. I'm not
okay, good. There was like no arguments presented within this video. It's actually ridiculous. There was like nothing. It was so bad. It was just like a misunderstanding of stats, a straw man understanding of the things that she's critiquing, addressing those straw mans with the full version of the idea that she's critiquing, and then claiming that her rebuttal based on the full version of the thing she's critiquing disproves the thing she's critiquing. It's actually ridiculous, okay? Whoever told me to watch this video and has been telling me to do so for months now, I'm actually going to find out their names so I can yell at them for a little bit. Leslie Henderson, you have caused me, and the person that liked it, okay? Leslie Henderson and the person that liked it, okay? You have caused me an immeasurable amount of pain, and I do not appreciate it, okay? This was a bad video, Leslie. Don't give me more videos like this, okay? A video on toxic masculinity is the worst. Should we do another one? What are we thinking, chat? How long is it? Prim Reaper toxic masculinity. Okay. Okay, how long is it? It's 20 minutes.
Honestly, it's a little disingenuous that so much of the scholarly literature is so critical of the progenitor group of the term toxic masculinity, and yet those who like to use the term are quick to jump behind the defense tactic of, but toxic masculinity isn't referring to all masculinity. After all, it was even originally created by a men's group. But let's not linger on that. Like it.
Wait, what? That's literally true, though. It's not all of masculinity, it's the toxic aspects of masculinity, hence the adjective toxic in front of masculinity.
It's not trying to develop positive internal strengths to build themselves up or become better rounded, more whole, more contented individuals. It's coming at male behaviors from an external focus, telling them all the ways that certain aspects of themselves are bad for them, strictly from an outside view, without taking into account how these supposed bad behaviors might actually be servicing them. This is especially...
Yes, that's the fault for toxic. That's the issue why we can't talk about toxic masculinity. That's its fault. The fundamental fault in the conceptualization of toxic masculinity is that. But have you considered the fact that bottling up emotional trauma and not seeking help about it might actually be good for you?
Especially so when trying to argue that they should drop these toxic behaviors, not for their own sake, but in the service of other people. I mean, nothing says mental health like drop or modify these behaviors inherent to your sex because the other sex finds them inconvenient in some way.
What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? God damn it!
The toxic masculinity approach does very little, if not nothing at all, to address the positive aspects of masculinity, or to push forward a constructive...
It's not meant to address the
Now, do you notice that every time someone tries to use the toxic masculinity narrative, they have to preface it with promises that it's not a criticism of masculinity as a whole? That's because whether they...
That's because you guys keep misunderstanding toxic masculinity. That is why people have to preface it with that every time. Because if we don't do that, then people like you think it's just like a generalized critique on all men ever and all masculinity.
Like it or not, the way this concept is discussed, and even the negative connotation of the term itself, leads people to believe that, more often than not, it is a condemnation of masculinity as a whole. This being the case, with how much additional criticism, perceived or otherwise, we've seen of men over the last couple of years, is it really any wonder we're seeing an increased incidence of mental health problems and suicides?
So she just made the argument that the recognition of toxic masculinity as a concept is what's driving mental health issues among men. Which is just such a galaxy brain take that I don't know how to interact with it properly. I'm just gonna move on. Leslie Henderson. I am a less happy person after I watch that. Who's up for a third video? No, fuck that. I'm gonna end myself. God damn, dude. Prim Reaper, if you ever want to have a conversation on any of these topics in relating to social justice, toxic masculinity, feminism, just any general like progressive social thing, 100% up for doing so. Okay, I think it could be a fun discussion, and it would be a wonderful time, in my opinion. So yeah, it would be a fun conversation, I think, on these topics, that we can work out the disagreements and discuss, you know, whether or not we should be pro social justice, we should, you know, talk about toxic masculinity, we should be feminist, we should be X, Y, and Z, because it would be a lot of fun, I think. So yeah, just gonna throw that one out there before the video ends, in case you're watching Prim Reaper, which you may be, who knows. But yeah. God damn it. I'm traumatized. That video was... Oh my god.